The charge showed up just after 8 a.m. on Sunday. I was reviewing our joint credit card account while Julia sat at the kitchen table, texting with her sister, or so she said. She glanced up once, smiling like she always did after a weekend away. Normal. Practiced. I almost smiled back. Then I saw it. Hotel Costella, downtown Bellevue, $978.46. The number stopped everything. I stared at it, waiting for it to explain itself. She told me she was at her sister's place for the weekend. They lived in Redmond. The charge was for Saturday night. 1 room. 1 night. Nearly $1,000. I looked at Julia again. Her face gave me nothing. She was pouring cereal, telling me about how her niece had learned a new card game. I nodded along, still staring at the screen. I didn't ask her. I didn't let her see it in my eyes. The moment passed. She went back to her story. I memorized the timestamp on the receipt and closed the app. That night, when we got in bed, I turned toward her. She turned away. I stayed awake long after her breathing slowed, watching the ceiling shift with passing headlights. I replayed everything she told me about the weekend. The movie they watched, the pizza place they ordered from, the joke about her sister's dog barking at a delivery guy. All of it was a little too polished. No pauses. No imperfections. Just enough detail to fill a conversation and steer it somewhere safe. I got up quietly, walked to the office, and turned on my laptop. The folder name came to me without hesitation. Maybe. Inside it, I saved a screenshot of the hotel charge. Then I added a document and typed out everything she told me about her trip. Time, place, her sister's dog's name, the wine brand from the photo she texted. It all went into the file. I wasn't confronting her. Not yet. I needed to know what I was looking at. When I came back to bed, she shifted and mumbled something. Maybe my name, maybe not. I didn't answer. I watched her back, and I waited for something in me to settle. It didn't. Over the next week, I studied her like I used to study closing contracts at work, carefully, dispassionately, like I was waiting to find a flaw in the numbers. I didn't change my behavior. I didn't pull away. I listened more, noticed more. Like how she always made sure her phone was face down now. How she smiled into it more often than at me. How she started wearing perfume to run errands. On Wednesday, I pulled up our cell account and checked her data usage. There were spikes on Saturday night, over 2 gigabytes used at 10:44 p.m., when she was supposedly asleep at her sister's. Thursday, she left work late. Texted me that her meeting had run over and she was grabbing a drink with a coworker. I told her to have fun. That night, I backed up her phone using an old iCloud login she'd forgotten to disable when she got her new one. I found nothing immediately, just her usual apps. The shell of normalcy held. But I kept the sync active, silent, watching. Friday morning, she kissed my cheek before leaving and asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no. Watched her drive away. 10 minutes later, I opened the Maybe folder and added a new subfolder. Location tracking. The name felt clinical, detached. It needed to. I wasn't a man prone to jealousy. I was a man who trusted logic. But logic told me this wasn't an overreaction. It was an investigation, one she didn't know had started. Yet, I copied the receipt again, stared at the date, the hotel address, and the line that said, Deluxe Suite, 1 king bed. Then I clicked print, folded it, put it in an envelope, locked it in my filing cabinet under miscellaneous business records. If she lied once, I needed to know how far the rot had spread. And if she hadn't lied, if by some miracle there was a logical, innocent explanation, I'd burn the file myself. But I already knew. No one spends $978 to sleep alone 15 minutes from their sister's house. No one sends a fake wine photo unless they're staging a scene. She wasn't just away that weekend. She was disappearing, piece by piece, from the life we built. I just hadn't caught her yet. But I would. The first time I followed her, it was raining. Not heavy, just enough to distort headlights and make everything feel more distant. She said she had a late client meeting, common enough for her work. She even showed me the calendar invite on her phone, casually, as if laying a trap she thought I'd never check twice. But the GPS I'd synced from her old iCloud told a different story. At 6:42 p.m., her phone left the city and headed east, not toward any office, toward a small town with overpriced cafes and a boutique yoga studio she'd visited exactly once. I watched her dot settle in a parking lot across from a wine bar with rustic lights and curated jazz. I waited 20 minutes before leaving. Drove slowly, lights off halfway down the street. I parked a block away and walked. My jacket was too thin. My fingers were cold. I didn't feel any of it. Through the window, she sat in the corner. She wasn't alone. He had a designer coat, dark green, with leather sleeves. Expensive. His posture was easy, like he belonged wherever he sat. He laughed once, threw his head back. She reached across the table, touched his wrist, and leaned in close. Close enough their foreheads nearly met. I watched him mouth something. She smiled with her whole face. I hadn't seen her smile like that in years. Then she kissed him. Not long. Not hidden. Just casual, like a well-worn ritual. I lifted my phone and took a photo. Not because I needed proof anymore. I already had it. But I needed a record for me. For later. For when she tried to rewrite this moment into something less obvious. He drove a black BMW. I took down the license plate. POS 9463. He pulled away first. She stayed behind, paid the bill, and took her time leaving. Like it wasn't her first time. I sat in my car long after she was gone. Didn't turn the engine over. Just stared at the photo. Her hand on his wrist. His eyes on her mouth. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. Not immediately. What I felt was stillness. The kind that comes right before something collapses. The moment a beam gives way and the ceiling starts to settle. Quiet. Almost dignified. I didn't go home right away. Drove instead to the office and printed everything. The license plate. The photo. Her GPS trail. Stapled them together and slid them into the maybe folder, which no longer felt like speculation. She came home at 9:54 p.m. hair damp from the rain. Said traffic was awful. Said she was starving. I heated up leftovers and watched her eat. She asked about my day. I told her it was long. She touched my hand and said, "I miss you this week." I nodded. I know. That night, we lay in bed. She curled into me like she used to. I let her. She smelled like lavender and something unfamiliar. Not cologne, something more subtle. I memorized it anyway. I waited until she fell asleep before getting up. Back at the computer, I opened a new subfolder, Contact 1, BMW, green coat. I didn't know his name yet, but I would. And once I did, the real work would begin. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed to understand just how far she'd gone to build a life I was never meant to see. The man in the green coat was named Evan. Evan Roth. He was a project manager for a mid-tier architecture firm with a habit of tagging wine bars and jazz clubs on social media. His BMW was leased through his company. Clean record. No family photos on his public profiles, just wine glasses, rooftops, curated solitude. A man who lived his life like a lifestyle campaign. Julia had met him through a networking dinner last October. I checked her calendar archive. She'd marked it as a Women's Leadership Roundtable. That night, she came home late and radiant. Said the conversation had been electric. I remembered that word because it sounded unlike her. But Evan was only the first face. Not the only one. The Gmail account surfaced a few days later. I found it through a backup error on her notes app. She'd copied a draft email and pasted it into a note titled, Speech Draft, Monday, except the signature line didn't match. It read, J, sent from jfieldconsulting@gmail.com. That account didn't exist in any of our shared records. I used recovery prompts to trace the creation date, March of last year. The password reset linked to her old phone number. She hadn't deleted it, just buried it. Inside the account were emails. Dozens. Maybe more. She'd been corresponding with someone under the initials DH for months. I ran the sender through a reverse lookup. It led to Darren Hellick, an art gallery owner she'd mentioned once in passing. Said she'd met him during creative solo time. That phrase hadn't registered before. Now it did. He'd sent her photos of sculptures. She'd sent him playlists, poems, compliments. Then they escalated. Plans, meetings, rendezvous at exhibit launches in other cities, weekend trips tagged as professional development, Venmo payments between them, coded as consult, or catering split. I searched the gallery's public events archive. She'd attended 5 in the past year. Alone. But there was more. Contact. TK. Came through an email exchange discussing zoning permits. That led me to Tyler Knox, a real estate investor Julia had met at a local nonprofit gala. He'd helped sponsor a property development project near our old neighborhood. I remembered the gala. I'd been sick that night. She went solo. Came home late, humming. Emails between them were shorter, precise, but one caught my eye. It read, "If he starts asking questions, pivot to strategy. We always knew this part would be messy. T." The date on that message was 2 weeks before the Hotel Costella charge. I stared at the screen until the words stopped making sense. Then I started cataloging everything. Separate subfolders for each name. Screenshots, cross-reference dates, patterns. Julia hadn't just strayed. She'd constructed parallel emotional lives, with their own language, schedules, and scaffolding. I wasn't watching a collapse. I was standing at the edge of a structure she'd built in secret. Carefully. Deliberately. It wasn't an affair. It was a campaign. And I was the loose thread she hadn't pulled yet. One morning, while she showered, I opened her desk drawer. Buried under office receipts and pens was a printed spreadsheet. Household routines. Neat columns. Wake times, meals, bedtimes. A full section titled Comfort Objects, and Conflict Triggers. It looked like a custody document, sanitized and clinical. I placed it back exactly how I found it. That night at dinner, she asked me if I'd thought more about taking a short trip. Just the two of us to reset. I told her I was too swamped with work. She nodded, not disappointed, not surprised. Almost like she already knew. She didn't bring it up again. I spent that night on the couch, claiming a stiff neck and late emails. She brought me tea before bed, smiled, said, "Don't stay up too late." I watched her walk down the hallway and disappear into our room. I opened the maybe folder and added 3 new files. Evan Roth, Cafe. Darren Hellick, Gallery. Tyler Knox, Zoning. There was no going back now. No chance this was a momentary lapse. This was architecture. And I'd finally found the blueprints. The first time I saw Paul's name in the mess, I didn't flinch. Just stared at it for a long time, like it hadn't clicked yet. He wasn't a stranger, not like Evan, Darren, or Tyler. Paul Lehman was an investor. Minor stake, but enough to get quarterly updates and the occasional invite to firm events. I'd shaken his hand, pitched him directly, trusted him enough to put our name next to his on a prospectus. Now his name was in Julia's inbox, not in the primary account, the hidden Gmail. A forwarded email thread from our company's financial summary. I read it twice, then checked the date. It was from 3 months ago. Subject line: Cross-departmental budget outlook, confidential. Julia had copied the contents into a message and sent it directly to Paul with the line, "Does this give us more leverage?" I leaned back in my chair, the document still glowing on the screen. I tried to think through it slowly. What leverage, in what context, for what gain? But my brain refused to make the connections gentle. She'd taken my work, information with financial implications, and passed it to someone outside the firm. A man she was seeing. A man I trusted in boardrooms. It got worse. Paul's name came up again, in a different context. Consulting fees. I checked our joint account history. No charges. But her personal Venmo account showed multiple payments from him, each with vague labels. Event prep, admin time, narrative work. It wasn't income from consulting. It was compensation, for something else. Something unspoken. It was about control. She was setting a foundation, financially, legally, emotionally. I could see it now in every move. Even in how she'd started keeping meticulous notes about routines, not just schedules, but phrases like emotional recalibration after disappointment, and tends toward avoidance when overwhelmed. Notes that sounded like she was building a case, not managing a household. I brought the spreadsheet to my attorney, told her to read between the lines. "She's preparing custody arguments," she said flatly, "framing you as unstable or emotionally absent. This isn't about now. This is groundwork." I didn't respond, just nodded once and slid another folder across the desk. The photos, the emails, the GPS trail, everything up to that point. My attorney looked through them and said, "We start documenting now." The next day, I installed high-resolution cameras in the office and common areas of the house. Not because I expected drama, because I needed a record of my calm, of my routines, of my measured steps. If she wanted to create a version of me, I'd make sure it stood next to the truth, time-stamped and archived. I opened another file in the maybe folder, labeled it Legal Prep, Phase 1. Inside I wrote, "She's not planning to leave, she's planning to win." That night, Julia came home late. Said she stopped by her friend Dana's to talk about nonprofit funding. Dana's husband, Marcus, was hosting a barbecue next weekend. She wanted us to come. Said it would be good optics. That word caught in my throat. I asked, "Optics for who?" She froze for a second too long, then smiled. "Just friends. Everyone misses seeing us together." I nodded. "Sure. Let's go." She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and said, "Thank you for being steady." I didn't reply. Just let the moment hang there. Watched her walk away again. In my inbox, I had one more file waiting. A forwarded complaint, anonymous, sent to Julia's nonprofit's ethics board. I hadn't written it. Not yet. But I knew someone who might. Not because I was vengeful. Because if she was turning my life into a performance, I was going to make sure she didn't own the script. I didn't go to Paul first. I went to Darren, the art gallery owner with the soft eyes and the tortured playlists. He didn't know I existed. Not really. In Julia's version of our life, I was emotionally absent, cold, unsupportive. He knew my name, but only as a silhouette of failure. The villain in her origin story. I sent a short email from a throwaway address. No threats. No rage. Just a line. "You deserve the full context. Let me know if you're ready for it." He responded within 20 minutes. We met in a neutral space, a private business lounge downtown. No eye contact at first. He thought I was bluffing. Thought I was trying to scare him off. Then I handed him the folder. Photos. Calendar overlays. GPS logs. Screenshots of messages. Receipts from 2 cities. Her voice on audio, from a restaurant patio. "He thinks I'm at a board meeting. He doesn't ask anymore. That's what I love about him. He just lets me disappear." He listened. He read. And then he broke. Not loudly. Quietly. One hand went to his mouth. The other trembled on the page as he stared down at the evidence. "She said I was the only one who really saw her," he whispered. "That I was it." I stayed silent. Let him unravel at his own pace. It wasn't the affair that broke him. It was what followed. "I work part-time with the family court system," he said, his voice thin. "Consulting. Mediation. She asked me about legal strategy, hypotheticals. Told me she needed to protect herself from volatility." I didn't respond. Just waited. He looked up, eyes rimmed with something close to shame. "She brought sealed custody templates, drafts, said she was just preparing for the future." "You helped her prepare them?" I asked, my voice steady. His voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. "She said she needed privacy. That you were erratic. That she had to protect her side before she said anything." I leaned forward. "You modified sealed documents on her behalf." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know she was lying." I placed the flash drive on the table. "This has the full record. I haven't shared it, but I need your help to make things right." His hands curled into fists, but not at me. At himself. "I'll testify," he said. "Whatever you need." "I don't need revenge," I said. "I need the truth recorded." Later that week, I met Paul at a neutral location too, a rooftop bar he liked for client optics. I brought a hard copy this time, nothing digital. When I handed him the folder, he let out a low laugh and shook his head. "Jesus, Mark," he said, flipping through the pages. "I didn't know you had this in you." I didn't react. "Did she tell you I was cheating?" He paused, eyes scanning the top document again. "She said you checked out emotionally, that you were controlling." I watched his face. "And that justified copying internal financials from my firm?" He said nothing. I showed him the printout of the email thread. Her message was printed at the top, and beneath it, his name. I tapped it once. "Does this give us more leverage?" I read aloud. Paul didn't flinch. "She told me it was just for positioning," he said. "That you were on the verge of cutting her out of the narrative, professionally and personally." I looked him squarely. "And the consulting payments?" He shrugged, almost casually. "She said they were for services." I didn't push. I leaned in slightly. "She was building a custody case. She used my company's data to make herself indispensable to you, didn't she?" He hesitated, then nodded. "She's persuasive." I sat back. "She turned everything, and everyone, into part of her version of the story." Paul leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Each of them thought they were the one. Each of them had a different version of who I was, the absent husband, the cold tyrant, the clueless provider. None of them had the full picture. Now I did. And Julia? She'd been rewriting the future like it was a grand proposal, tailoring it to her audience, erasing what didn't fit. She hadn't just betrayed me. She tried to edit me out of my own life. That night, I opened the final document in the maybe folder, titled it, Narrative Collapse. Then I wrote one line. She cast me as the villain to justify her exit. But the story's hers to explain now. The confrontation was coming. She just didn't know the stage was already built. I didn't plan it for drama. There was no grand reveal, no public scene. Just a Tuesday evening like any other. She came home a little late, not enough to raise questions, just enough to suggest she wasn't rushing back. She took off her coat, kissed my cheek, and asked, "Dinner or just drinks tonight?" I told her I'd already eaten. "Want to sit for a minute?" She paused. "Sure." We sat in the living room. I handed her a glass of wine. The same red from the photo she sent that night from her sisters. The bottle she said they picked out together. She looked at it and smiled faintly, but didn't drink. "I need to play something for you," I said. I reached for my phone and tapped the file. Her voice came through the speaker. Quiet. Intimate. Recorded from her dinner with Evan. "He's completely in the dark. I'll be free by spring." She didn't react at first. Just sat there, like maybe if she didn't move, the moment would pass. Then, "What is this?" I didn't answer. Just handed her the folder. Evan, Darren, Tyler, Paul, the financial leaks, the court drafts, the spreadsheet, the sealed email. She flipped through them in silence, her fingers trembling now, breath uneven. A flush rose along her neck. I'd seen her lie before, small things, white lies, omissions. But this wasn't omission. This was strategy. She tried denial first. "You've misunderstood. This looks worse than it is." Then came the pivot. "We were broken. You just didn't want to admit it. I was trying to find clarity. That's all." "Is that what this is?" I asked, pointing to the document with Darren's court revisions. "Clarity?" Her voice cracked. "You don't understand what it's like to feel erased." I nodded. "No. I only know what it's like to be erased silently, piece by piece, by someone who called it love." She stood up. "I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't hurt me. You built a life on my name, my work, my stability, and then tried to cut me out like bad footage. You didn't cheat. You cast me as the villain in your escape fantasy." She looked stunned. Not by the accusation, but by the precision. She wasn't used to being confronted without chaos. She wanted yelling, crying, anything she could twist into instability. I gave her none of it, just silence, and then, "I'll be leaving tomorrow morning. My attorney is filing for divorce and an emergency custody motion before noon." Her mouth opened, then closed. I walked upstairs, packed a single bag, and slept in the guest room with the door locked. I left before sunrise. At 11:03 a.m., my attorney filed the papers. By 3:17 p.m., Julia's legal counsel had already responded. She was prepared. Of course she was. But she hadn't planned for all of it, not for the full scale, not for the quiet precision. She thought I'd scream. Instead, I documented. She thought I'd beg. Instead, I built my case. She thought I'd break. Instead, I walked away while she was still flipping pages, still looking for a version of the truth she could live with. But she'd already burned that bridge. And I'd already filed the evidence. 3 days after the confrontation, Aaron, the gallery owner, was called to respond formally by the court. The court had flagged inconsistencies in the digital metadata of the custody drafts Julia had submitted. Edits traced back to his login. He hadn't just reviewed them. He'd modified sealed family court documents on her behalf. His cooperation flipped quickly under pressure. He submitted a full affidavit outlining Julia's requests, their nature, and how she framed the situation: volatile marriage, emotional neglect, fear of losing her future. He admitted she'd misled him, not because it cleared his conscience, but because the evidence had already backed him into a corner. That afternoon, Julia's nonprofit board received an anonymous ethics complaint. Attached were 2 PDFs, one detailing misreported travel reimbursements, covering hotel stays labeled as regional leadership retreats, that matched weekends with Paul or Darren, and another outlining irregularities in consulting fees, payments routed through Paul's firm. Her suspension was immediate. "Pending investigation," the letter said. But I knew what that meant. By the end of the week, she was formally removed from the board. Next came formal action, a complaint filed by a co-founder of the nonprofit. She alleged misuse of donor funds. Named Julia specifically. Public, ugly, and accompanied by a brief article in a local blog that quietly made its way through our social circles. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. One of Julia's former friends messaged me late one night. A single sentence. She told us you were cruel. We didn't see the pattern. Now we do. I didn't reply. There were consequences in court too. With Erin's affidavit and the documentation of her calculated groundwork, the routine spreadsheet, the concealed Gmail, the false narratives she fed to multiple people, our emergency custody filing held. Julia's legal team tried to reframe. Said she was in crisis, acting out of emotional desperation. The judge didn't buy it. A temporary parenting order was issued in my favor. Structured. Supervised. The house was quiet. Still. Not peaceful. Just emptied of her. That weekend, while sorting the last of what she left behind, I found it. The date jar. An old mason jar filled with folded slips of paper. Promises from early days. Her handwriting bright and curved. Go apple picking. Sing karaoke at that dive bar. Weekend at a cabin. No phones. All of them moments we never got to. I didn't read them all. I dropped them into the fireplace and watched as they slowly turned to ash. The ashes curled in on themselves like they were trying to take shape again. But they didn't. Then I went to the safety deposit box, the one we'd opened together, back when we thought there was something fragile we might one day lose. Inside was a single envelope labeled, "In case we lose each other, some things deserve to be saved." I opened it. Inside was a print of our first photo together, her old charm bracelet, a note that said, "If anything ever happens, know I tried, and that I loved you in the only way I knew how." I left behind three things: a printed copy of the sealed court edits with Erin's digital signature, the ethics complaints reference number, and a new note in my handwriting. "The thing you forgot to save was the truth." Then I locked the box and walked out.